It's been a while since Soul last saw the white-haired senior, but as expected, he's still as reckless as ever. His rapid transition from heavenly birth to the law of spirit energy was quite surprising. As Soul talked about himself, the senior felt proud that Soul would risk his life for others while remaining humble. He's gaining more favor with the senior. Soul also questioned how the senior identified him correctly while hiding his face. Soul's defensive maneuvers were a dead giveaway. Besides, no one would interfere in other people's business like him. Thanks to the giant shadow turtle's maiden, Senior Gwango Duin reached the late-stage law of spirit energy to break out of the lone spirit land. He wanted to commemorate that with Zhongwen from the Su family, but all he saw was destruction. The world seemed to have changed even more than he had. Finally, they arrived at the secret location of the Su family, where an old lady with a kind face greeted them. She's the guardian of this covert location. She invited everyone inside to recuperate, so we'll assess that this old lady is at the first stage of the law of spirit energy. In the secret underground space, there was an arrangement prepared in case of destruction. Su Wei would lead them through this secret passageway. He executed the necessary hand seals and touched the floor, revealing a staircase leading downwards. Descending to the basement, Saul saw a sizable magic formation. This arrangement appeared to be a teleportation portal, smaller than the forest of beasts but larger than the Iron Sphere sects. The location this portal connected to was a secret of the Su family. Sui handed Soul and the senior small bags. These contained every spirit stone they could spare as a token of appreciation for their kindness. Sui felt ashamed that they could only offer so little. The senior declined the bag outright, considering it inappropriate to accept from their benefactors. Soul also refused, not expecting any reward and thinking it would be more useful for the Su siblings. The remnants of the Su family, finally overwhelmed with emotions, had been sheltered by the family until this disaster, realizing how cruel the world can be. However, seeing Soul and the senior gave them hope that the world wasn't entirely dark. Sui was moved to the point of kneeling, vowing with his younger siblings to rebuild the family, with everyone in the Su family acknowledging Soul and the senior's greatness. Rather than formalities, the mystery lay in where this portal led. It teleported them outside of the country to the Daewoo Nation, known for its skilled alchemists, although challenging. Experiencing a broader world would undoubtedly help them rebuild. The siblings would increase their levels and lay the groundwork for their reconstruction. In this place where strength was revered and life meant little, they would go all in to rebuild the Su family legacy. With these 3 children of the Su clan becoming respectable alchemists, the portal could accommodate up to 7 people, providing ample space for more. Senior Gwango Duin expressed his desire to join them in their journey. As this country had become the world of the evil sect, there was no reason for him to stay any longer. Perhaps he could break through to the breath of the sun in the larger Daewoo Nation. The old woman outside agreed to accompany them, offering a powerful ally. When an invitation was extended to Soul, he entered deep thought. The faces of the people he had met in this country flashed through his mind. While interested, he couldn't leave now. Severing relationships for an alchemist would always be complicated. Sui and everyone waited for 3 more days, just in case there were other survivors, but they were the only ones left. Before departing, Sumi insisted on teaching Soul how to use the portal in case he changed his mind. Finally, they bid farewell, hoping to reunite in the future. Soul initially thought their relationship was shallow, but he now felt a sense of emptiness as they left. For now, he needed to return to the Mountain of 5 Gates. He made an excuse to his assigned party, claiming he got lost in the forest. The Evil Sect Alliance concluded that there were no survivors left. At the cultivation area of the Iron Sphere sect, someone practiced a familiar technique. It was senior sister Makia missing her junior brother. She couldn't help but worry about him after his conscription. Thankfully, she spotted a familiar figure in the air atop a flying sword. Makium thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, but it truly was her dearly missed junior brother. The two quickly resumed their playful banter. She excitedly mentioned her newfound ability to create spiral bombs with both hands. Senior sister could finally test her skills against Soul in a strength contest. However, he preferred any mission or war instead of being her practice partner again. A year passed and Soul continued to practice diligently. Today, his defensive abilities would be put to the test as he blocked his senior sister's relentless spiral bombs. He managed to block everything this time, but she was growing more formidable by the minute. Just as they were about to continue their conversation, Soul's hidden slave urgently entered the scene. Dong Bu then rushed here to report that the Dauntless sect was attacking and killing disciples of the Iron Sphere sect. This news was shocking because the Dauntless sect was supposed to be their ally. However, The slaughter of 6 Law of Spirit Energy Masters on the way here left no doubt about the declaration of war. Dongbu's distress was palpable, and Sewell decided to spare his life by providing him with an antidote for the poison in his system. Dongbu knew the way out of Mount Junhua so that they could follow him to safety. Seeing that his senior sister was lost in thought, Sewell allowed Dongbu to run ahead. Their immediate concern was to inform her father, the master of the land, about the attack. Her father initially expressed skepticism, but the gravity of the situation and the look on her face convinced him. Their first priority was to meet with Mu Gyoxin. As they left the garden, they discovered Mu Gyoxin's lifeless body. They decided to retreat to safety with no time to bury him, as the enemy was likely waiting to seize the teleportation portal. They planned to descend the mountain through the Forest of Beauty when another person approached them, imploring them to flee. This newcomer was the sect's young master, who had a better understanding of the situation. The Dauntless sect had betrayed them, and their goal was to gain control of the entire nation. The evil and justice sects were already aligned with them, thanks to a powerful alchemist from the Dauntless Association who had broken through a decade ago. The young master knew this firsthand, as his father and several elders had already fallen victim to the expert's brutality. Sewell knew they had to escape, as he was tired of being caught up in uncontrollable situations. Fortunately, the 3 of them were not low-level practitioners. They should be able to make it out of Mount Junhua. However, as they followed the route through the Forest of Fine Beauty, Sewell sensed trouble. They had fallen into a trap, and the enemy was closing in fast. A high-speed flying sword chase ensued, and Sewell realized he might have a chance to escape alone, but staying with the group would likely lead to their demise. 6 people pursued them, and aside from senior sister Moke, the other 2 were not of much help. Sewell recalled a similar situation at the Mountain of 5 Gates, where fleeing had been a wise choice. However, his attachment to his senior sister, whom he had spent a year with, made him hesitate. So, he's basically a simp. She was strong in combat but lacked a proper Dharma tool and proficiency in the arts. Sewell believed he could contend with the Law of Spirit Energy alchemists, but their surprise attack from behind changed everything. The old man fell from the flying sword, and seeing her father in danger, Makiyum sprang into action. She gathered 2 spiral bombs in her hands and aimed them at the pursuing alchemists. Initially, the pursuer seemed confident with a well-timed barrier. The spiral bombs shattered it. It was a feat that shouldn't have been possible, revealing Makiyum as an exceptionally dangerous heavenly birth alchemist. Now, the escaping party had no choice but to stand their ground and fight together. The dauntless alchemists focused their attacks on Makiyum, disregarding the young master. However, their efforts were in vain as Sewell's artifact neutralized their attacks. After a year of peace, it was time for another battle, and Sewell wielded his blade to face the enemies head-on. The dauntless alchemist had just realized that 2 individuals were concealing their powers. However, they remained confident in their numerical advantage. 4 of them focused on Sewell and Makiyum, while the other 2 targeted the elderly man and the young master. Young Master Wu had completely given up, believing they were doomed. He stood behind the woman he adored and a junior brother, desperately wanting to escape. In contrast, Sewell maneuvered his swords to take charge of the offense. Initially, targeting the man in charge with his large barrier seemed foolish, but Sewell quickly shattered that magic barrier to pieces. Unfortunately, another man blocked his killing blow. Given more time, Sewell might have succeeded in landing a fatal strike. As for old man Mok Jung, he barely held on with his tiny shield, far from the protective father he aspired to be. His daughter and Sewell fought with twice the determination of everyone else. Meanwhile, Makiyum worried about her father on the side. He meant everything to her. The thought of failing to protect him filled her with deep self-loathing, almost as if the enemies could read her mind. A sword pierced the old man's chest. Senior sister watched in horror as her father fell to the ground with a blade through his chest. Makiyum began to transform, a sinister aura enveloping her. This transformation was beyond anyone's expectations. She morphed into something resembling a beast, with the sinister aura running wild. The dauntless alchemists had no idea what this aura was until one of them was completely engulfed and met a painful end. Another was so distracted by the chaos that he lost an arm. Makiyum moved like a wild monster, unmatched in speed and power. Her father remained conscious, desperately pleading with her to stop. His efforts to conceal her true origin had clearly failed. Regaining his composure, one of the alchemists muttered the words celestial being. The only explanation for Makiyum's dramatic transformation was that she was a celestial being. Now, Sewell understood why his senior sister was exceptionally strong. She had the blood of a sacred beast mixed with her humanity. Her Nidun was unique, offering advantages but also exhausting her. Some alchemists hunted celestial beings for their blood to gain immense spiritual power. This must have been why Makium and her father were living quietly in the cultivation area. When left uncontrolled, the sinister aura brought an impending sense of doom. It clung to one of the enemy's barriers and quickly crushed it, leading to a brutal death. The remaining dauntless alchemists decided to retreat and report this to their senior master. It seemed that Makium had also exhausted herself for the time being. The group took a moment to assess the damage they had incurred. Fortunately, the old man's organs were undamaged by the sword. Now that senior sister Makium's true identity as a celestial being was revealed, the dauntless sect would pursue her even more vigorously. They needed to escape the forest of fine beauty as quickly as possible. However, news of senior sister's true form had already reached the ears of the sect's most powerful alchemist. Her unique form and patterns marked her as a genuine celestial being. The senior master wasted no time and gave chase, determined to capture her at any cost. He closed in on their route, and a celestial being was about to fall into his hands. The pressure from the breath of the sun alchemist was overwhelming. As Makium regained consciousness, she realized the situation had deteriorated. Fully aware that they were cornered, young Master Wu tried to reassure her, but his words earned him a swift and fatal beam of light through his skull. "That's a perfect sniper headshot." Young Master Wu fell quickly and abruptly. If he wouldn't give up Makium peacefully, the senior master was prepared to steal her away. Makium was still in shock from everything that had happened, while the master was already preparing to capture her. All old man Mok Jung could think about was stopping the expert. He would do anything for his beloved daughter, Yum. Holding a mysterious pill in his hand, he cared not if his latent powers surged or his Nidun shattered. He was determined to save his daughter at any cost. The old man swallowed the pill with his last wish for Seoul to take care of Yum. Old man Mok Jung transformed, becoming unrecognizable from his frail self. The senior master only glanced down at him, considering him a mere novice in the world of heavenly birth. The gap between them was immense. Flying swords and sneak attacks proved futile against the formidable aura of the sun and alchemist. These attempts were feeble against his aura-covered blades. The small daggers easily pierced the old man's trusted shield, leaving him with only his wooden staff to fight with. Empowered by a mysterious pill, Mok Jung's combat skills had soared to unprecedented levels. In the midst of a battle against an overwhelmingly powerful opponent, he even managed to catch his fallen daughter. However, wood alone could not withstand the senior master's true Sumati fire. With no means to extinguish the flames, Mok Jung had to abandon his weapon. With nothing but his bare hands, Mok Jung refused to surrender and pressed forward. He was determined to buy his daughter even a moment's respite, no matter how brief. Makium understood her father's sacrifice. Stowell also knew the inevitable outcome. Without hesitation, the senior master struck another fatal blow. They had been on the run for hours, and now dawn was breaking. Makium's father had given his life to protect her. If night was the time of the fiends, then dawn belonged to the sacred beasts. She transformed into her celestial form and broke free from the vines. This time, it wasn't just brute force and a sinister aura that aided her. Under the sun's rays, she unlocked her absolute spiritual eyes. Even the formidable breath of the sun alchemist sensed danger as she tapped into this ability. Suddenly, the almighty senior master of the Dauntless Association looked as if he had seen a ghost. Thoughts of his inferiority to his exceptional brother flooded his mind. He was ensnared in a deeply personal and intricate illusion. After activating this potent ability, Makium's body gave in, and she lost consciousness. Sowell caught her and broke her fall. She had done something to trap the invincible senior master in a mysterious bubble. This presented the perfect opportunity to escape as swiftly as possible. Sowell ran for 3 days without rest and arrived at the Jew mansion in Lee District. He entered the residence designated for him, and it appeared that no one had been there for the past 2 years. His first priority was to assess his senior sister's condition thoroughly. Her wild spiritual power made even a simple energy probe impossible. His first task was to create a potion to calm her spiritual power, and then a dun pill for her recovery. Attendant John came to greet Sowell, but it was clear the alchemist was occupied. Sowell noticed his brother's arrival and called out. It had been a long time since they last saw each other, and he wanted to know if anything had happened in the Jew family. Brother John revealed that the first young master had graduated from the palace, a cause for celebration in the district. However, the second young miss was not feeling well. She had received a marriage proposal from a prestigious suitor. She had reached a marriageable age but had no desire to wed. It wasn't the right time to delve into all of that. Brother Zhang hurried to inform the young miss of Master Wu's return. Soul quickly brewed and administered the calming potion to Makiyum. The after effects of battling two law of spirit energy alchemists and confronting a breath of the sun alchemist were evident. For the first time in over 2 years, Lady Ju and Soul had crossed paths again. He inquired about how she had been since their last meeting. Lady Ju felt like her family had achieved a higher status, but everything remained the same. Soul also wanted to understand why she had been rejecting marriage proposals. His question was rather direct, and the lady couldn't easily provide an answer. The implications of everything seemed to elude Soul, who saw this as an opportunity to ask to stay for a while. Minus one wife. The mansion had always been built and maintained for him, remaining empty until now. He also mentioned that they were being pursued. Alchemists were searching Yangzhou for him and his senior sister. Lady Ju believed that their pursuers wouldn't think to look for them in a mortal's mansion. Her unconscious senior sister had lost not only her father but also someone who cherished her deeply. Her physical injuries were severe, but her emotional wounds were just as profound. As Lady Ju gazed at Makiyum, she was captivated by her beauty. She granted permission for them to stay for as long as they needed. However, Soul knew they couldn't linger. He couldn't entangle the Ju family in the dauntless sex pursuit. His priority was to treat his senior sister as quickly as possible so they could bounce out of here. A few days passed and Makiyum finally woke up, but her eyes were empty. Seeing his senior sister awaken was a relief until he realized what she had just gone through. He didn't know what to talk about with her anymore. Lady Ju knew this and went to Makiyum's side. It had been 3 days since she saw this lady. Lady Ju continued to talk about the weather and the affairs of the mansion's servants, her younger brother's antics, and her older brother's rise in the world. She brought up snacks imported from nearby countries, talking and talking, promising to come by again tomorrow. Ever since then, Ju Garyon came by every day and talked by herself for half a day. It was all meaningless and mundane talk about her daily life. She had been doing this for the past 8 days. On the 9th day, Makiyum nodded in response to the story. After that, her recovery was noticeable, and she started talking from time to time. Another 4 days passed, and although her expression was still dark, she was almost back to her original self. They could leave soon, but Soul needed to do some things. He looked at the constitution of everyone in the Ju mansion and found that no one had an outstanding physique. Even Lady Ju didn't have the potential for cultivation. If they did, he would have taught them Qigong and imparted a few dun pills. But Lady Ju didn't need to become an alchemist. She loved her family and her life. She wouldn't leave them to improve her level. Soul reminded her to find her own path, but she was satisfied with what she had. Lady Ju had figured out that Soul was checking up on everyone because he would be leaving for good. Even he thought he should have done that a few years ago. Lady Ju knew she wouldn't be able to hold on to him, but it was still a pity that there was nothing she could do. Just knowing that Soul regretted that fact too gave her a little relief. Lady Ju led him to her personal storage after that. Since alchemists didn't have to bother with big storage rooms like this, she wanted Soul to take all the clothing in here into his pocket. Contrary to other lofty immortals, Soul often did dangerous things and ruined his clothes after all. He promptly took all the lavish clothing and brought out a few recovery pills in return. These pills could extend immortals' lifespan and cure illnesses. They could use these pills however they wanted. There was no need to feel burdened since these were ineffective for alchemists. Now that they were bidding farewell, Lady Ju solemnly wished for Soul to take care of himself. He fumbled the bag with her, for sure. Brother Zhang's farewell was not as graceful, though. He cried and cried after knowing that Soul was leaving. Since he was so sad, this master wound might have to bring out the big guns. 3 containers of sweet liquor brewed by alchemists. An alcoholic drink that improved your health. It was decided that for tonight, the two would have their last drink before parting ways. Night came, and the time for Soul and Makiyum to leave had come. Everything that needed to be taken care of here had been done. His ties with District Li were over, but he felt a twinge of regret. There was no turning back. These two must disappear from Yanzhou. Their destination was the Diwun Nation. The teleportation portal of the Su family brought them to the southern part of the nation, in the Yuyang province. The first thing they needed to do in this foreign land was to find people. They needed to check out how different the people of the Diwun Nation were. It didn't take long for them to arrive at a city gate near the mountains. There was a big gate for alchemists and a small one for mortals. This was new to Soul. For now, they couldn't pretend to be ordinary people with Makiyum still injured. The guard halted them right at the door. Each person had to pay a toll fee of 10 low-class spirit stones for entry. This guard was immediately smitten by Makiyum's undeniable beauty, but duty called and he had to make them pay 20 spirit stones to enter. It was expensive, but they had no other choice for now. The guard handed them the passes for the city. Entering the large metropolis with alchemists freely moving through the air left the duo awestruck. It was far from what they were used to. This was the Daewoo Nation. Daewoo Nation, a martial arts powerhouse, is a land where mortals are keenly aware of the existence of alchemists. Affluent parents even confirm their child's physical potential from a young age. Ordinary individuals lacking extraordinary physical attributes pursue martial arts for self-improvement, nurturing dreams of achieving immortality. The ambience here is distinctly unusual, as alchemists and mortals coexist seamlessly. To their knowledge, a lord governs the world's affairs, but there's no emperor. They urgently require intelligence from fellow alchemists. Soul, therefore, beckoned one of the young servers in the tavern. He aimed to discover the location of the largest marketplace in exchange for a low-tier spirit stone. The boy readily informed them of marketplaces situated at the north and south gates, emphasizing the Long Life store as their best bet for comprehensive supplies. However, he also mentioned secretive trade fairs reserved for exclusive items, accessible only by invitation. Currently, Soul contemplates a visit to the Long Life store, while Makyum intends to remain in her room, examining the pouches taken from the alchemists of the dauntless sect she had slain. There's little doubt she hasn't already rifled through them. The pain of her father's demise still lingers. As Soul's senior sister and savior, he feels obliged to offer his utmost support. Soul activates his remarkable disguise, assuming the appearance of the Iron Sphere sect elder from days past. Concealing his true level and appearance appears to be a safer course of action in this environment. The first merchant who approached him led Soul to an outdoor table. He sought domesticated ginseng, light grass, cedar, and udambara, herbs both rare and costly, but this store boasted most of them in stock. Regrettably, udambara remains elusive. Nevertheless, Soul doesn't flinch at the exorbitant price, gladly parting with copious spirit stones. Casually flexing his high roller money outside the store is crazy. The merchant's demeanor immediately brightens upon witnessing his wealth. Soul takes possession of the sacred herbs, and the merchant pledges a warmer reception for future dealings. However, if he desires udambara, there's only one path available: the forthcoming secret trade fair. While exclusive, entry is possible with a wealth exceeding 1,000 middle-class spirit stones. Despite his ample resources from Winetail, Soul finds this arrangement suspicious. The merchant agrees to provide the event's time and location without requesting anything in return. 5 days later, Soul divests himself of extraneous belongings, accumulating all his spirit stones for the impending secret trade fair. There, he is welcomed by a mysterious masked woman. Customarily, patrons must don masks before entering the trade fair. The rules dictate a nominal commission fee for each purchase. All items are auctioned, although alternatives for equal value trades with fellow alchemists are also available. Soul is embraced warmly at his first secret trade fair. Yet, an unsettling feeling creeps in. The breath of the sun alchemists likely frequent this gathering. In Yangzhou, the entire power structure crumbled due to one breath of the sun alchemist. Now, someone wielding that same power may be participating in tonight's auction. With everyone present, the trade fair commences. First up is a low-ranked talisman, the blue jade ring imbued with spiritual energy recovery capabilities. Talismans hold a higher status than Dharma tools, a category that includes Soul's Mihirit ring from his masters. Acquiring the blue jade ring would undoubtedly be beneficial. However, Soul's primary objective remains obtaining udambara today. The next items on the agenda include a rare 1,000-year-old sacred herb, a dung pill effective for law of spirit energy alchemists, a magic beast's egg, and a low-class magic beast's nidun. Now, it's Soul's turn to present the essence of the shadow orchid, a concentrated essence loathed by any fiend. It's a genuine savior against the threat posed by fiends. Soul isn't seeking spirit stones. He simply requires a piece of udambara. However, the uniqueness of his product complicates assessing its value. There are alchemists who have never encountered a fiend, let alone hunted one. Perhaps only higher-level alchemists can truly appreciate the value of this item. Soul's plan appears to unravel when it comes to the shadow orchid essence. However, a man at the back expresses his willingness to trade it for his udambara. Soul rejoices, eager to finalize the deal. Yet, the man at the back insists on a singular condition. You might be wondering about the mysterious condition, and Soul is pondering the same question. It's quite simple. The masked man simply wants to discuss the origin of the shadow orchid essence. Conversing outdoors would inevitably lead to the revelation of their identities, which is a bit sus. Soul contemplated inquiring if anyone else was interested, but no one expressed any interest. Thus, the matter was settled. Following the trade fair, the two rendered vows at the poacher's inn without their masks. However, Saul maintained his disguise. The mysterious man appeared unassuming, yet he undeniably concealed an overwhelming power. Almost no one possesses knowledge of the essence's effects or its existence. Thus, the man is curious about how Soul stumbled upon it. Of course, Soul can choose not to divulge this information. The man reached into his pocket, signaling the start of the transaction. However, his version of the deal involved launching a flaming dagger directly at Soul. Fortunately, Soul had prepared for potential sneak attacks. He swiftly replicated himself into numerous identical bodies and fled the inn. Although the man could intensify his pursuit, doing so would attract too much attention from the Lord of Yuan province. The man is banking on his recognition of Soul's face, even when it's concealed by a disguise. For the time being, things appear to be in Soul's favor, but he is left wondering where everything went wrong. Perhaps it all began with the merchant from earlier, who was sorely lacking in information and too naive when dealing with strangers. Nonetheless, this doesn't change the fact that the man had an umbrella with him. As dawn breaks, there's a sudden knock at Soul's door. It's the server boy from earlier, delivering snacks. Soul decides to glean more information from this local. When Soul inquires about a robber who targets alchemists at a remote inn, the boy's complexion darkens in fear. Soul notices the shift in the boy's demeanor and presses for further details. This robber is known as the Faceless Murderer, a high-level practitioner who specifically targets foreign alchemists. Even the province's elders have been unable to apprehend him. It appears that everyone at the trade fair was aware of this individual and wanted to avoid unnecessary trouble. If Soul wishes to learn more, he'll need to inquire within the Baoxin sect. They are the primary source of information in the province, but their services come at a steep price. They operate as an unconventional intelligence organization, openly conducting their business. Reverting to his disguise, Soul proceeds to gather much-needed intelligence. He doesn't beat around the bush and requests information about the Faceless Murderer. As he passes through multiple doors, he senses no presence of Qi. The organization's defenses are formidable. Upon reaching the heart of the compound, a seductive voice grants Soul permission to enter. Entering this room, he's immediately shocked as his true form is revealed in a reflection. In this room, no secrets remain hidden. The one attending to him is a master of unique Qigong, Xiaobing, the lord of the Hujing branch of Baoxin sect. Soul goes by the name Wunmo, though he struggles against a drowsy scent permeating the room. He must pose his question regarding the Faceless Murderer, and Xiaobing will name her price. Soul's query is straightforward. Will there be any significant parties seeking vengeance once he eliminates the Faceless Murderer? The answer to that question demands 5 high-class spirit stones. Without hesitation, he pays the fee, and the Lord reveals that the Faceless Murderer operates as a lone wolf. For further details about the man's life, it costs him another 5 high-class spirit stones, a somewhat exorbitant sum. The Faceless Murderer gained notoriety when he reached the law of spirit energy a few centuries ago, continuing his reign of terror to this day. He is cautious and meticulous in his work, having operated for 300 years. Soul's concealment of his true level made him an ideal target. However, the murderer has recently grown more audacious, deviating from his usual caution. As for specific information about his methods, it comes at the cost of another 10 spirit stones. The Faceless Murderer wields an indistinct dagger or employs his victim's own weapon. Once Soul eliminates this individual, the Lord invites him to return to the sect. Even this conversation they've had is just another piece of information that the cunning Xiaobing is willing to sell. 15 more days pass, and all of Soul's preparations are in order. He now requires the final ingredient, the Udambara, at any cost. After several days of diligent work, his initial preparations are complete. It has been 2 months since their arrival at this inn, and the server boy has become quite familiar with him. As for Makyum, things have remained relatively uneventful for her. However, aside from significant incidents, there have been 1 or 2 minor ones involving her. She doesn't fit the typical alchemist profile, so some individuals have dared to approach her romantically. An annoying master once attempted to expel Makyum due to her mortal status, but she promptly dismissed him with a demonstration of her spiral bomb. Her true power is hidden behind her eyes, so she seldom emerges from her room, now concealing her face with a black fabric. Paradoxically, this only makes her stand out even more. On another note, Soul is inquisitive about any updates concerning the Faceless Murderer. The boy ensures it's safe to talk and informs him that more victims have recently perished, 5 to be exact. The number of casualties is difficult to believe, including 1 alchemist skilled in the law of spirit energy. It aligns with what Xiaobing mentioned. The province's residents are eager for the government to take action. However, if that occurs, the Udambara will fall in the hands of the authorities. He must act swiftly before it's too late. Night descends, and Sowell exits the inn, donning his remarkable disguise once more. He has been patrolling for 2 hours each day and finally strikes gold. The faceless murderer is relentlessly pursuing him. Sowell identifies the ideal location to counterattack and deploys all his combat Dharma tools. On the city's outskirts, only the two of them are visible. This man is driven solely by greed, lusting after Sowell's numerous Dharma tools and stacks of spirit stones. He doesn't deny his intention to rob Sowell. There's no need to conceal motives. 2 months have passed since their initial encounter, and there's no room for idle chatter. This man is reputedly a known thief, that he wields an ordinary Dharma tool. Regardless, Sowell must exercise caution when dealing with this middle-stage law of spirit energy alchemist. He effortlessly blocks the initial twin-wheel attack and counterattacks with his sword. 3 blades whir through the air, targeting the murderer's head. However, they prove futile against a formidable energy shield. His summoned clones also succumb to the second phase of the twin-wheel attack. He narrowly defends against the ferocious assault of the peculiar Dharma tool with his shield. Thus far, Sowell's attacks are on par with those of a heavenly birth alchemist, its child's play. However, upon realizing Sowell's intentions, the faceless murderer conjures his spirit fire, launching it in an attempt to disrupt any potential surprises. Those flames only succeed in eliminating Sowell's clones. Now, with a gourd in hand, he pursues the man relentlessly. Sowell's focus on the chase blindsides him, and he's struck in the back by a spirit fire. He has just lost his trump card. The gourd falls to the ground. The faceless murderer picks it up, intrigued. He wonders what gave Sowell the audacity to pursue him recklessly. The man believes this duel merely demonstrates a difference in skill, and he intends to conclude it by killing Sowell with his own weapon. Upon opening the gourd, a malevolent dark energy is released, engulfing the fool.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
It's a lesser devil poison, a concoction Sowell has been crafting for the past few weeks. Concealing traces and killing for pleasure has ultimately strangled the murderer. Desperately, the man pleads for his life, offering to reveal the location of his treasures to Sowell in exchange for an antidote. However, Sowell's masters have cautioned him against believing a dying thief's last words. Completing the job is the only correct course of action, despite any pleas. As anticipated, the lesser devil poison is terrifying. He strives to use it on people as sparingly as possible. Regarding the loot from this kill, there are only a meager number of spirit stones and subpar Dharma tools. It appears he did indeed conceal his treasures. Yet among these low-value items is a red treasure jade. Sowell experiments with it, infusing it with his spiritual energy. It promptly absorbs every trace within his system. The jade completely sapped his remaining energy. It was undoubtedly an extraordinary item, yet Sowell had no clue how to harness its power. An object like this should respond to spiritual energy, but this one remained utterly undisturbed. Using spirit stones yielded the same absorption effect. Perhaps the faceless murderer had diligently fed this artifact with all of his ill-gotten gains. As an experiment, Sowell decided to infuse it with 40 high-class spirit stones. The energy from these precious gems dissipated swiftly. It didn't take long for him to take the gamble and attempt to unlock the treasure jade's power. He was in too deep now, determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. Sowell had invested half of his entire net worth into this enigmatic object, and there was still no response. Deciding to set this mystery aside for the moment, he turned his attention to creating some pills for his senior sister. After gathering all the necessary ingredients, he finally concocted the healing pill for Makiyam's treatment. However, it appeared that she was out and about for the day, which was better than staying cooped up in her room. When Sowell checked the inn's lobby, he noticed an unusually large crowd. Another month had passed and Sowell was last in this place, and the server boy led him to his seat. There wasn't a single vacant table in the shop, and even some of the newcomers were complaining. All these people had come for the rift. It had opened 30 years ago, and some alchemists had their lives changed within it, so now they were returning for more. Some claimed that there were precious treasures in the center lake of the rift, but no one dared to approach it. According to what Sowell had gathered, this rift resembled the concentrated spirit land that regularly opened near Hujing. Suddenly, every man in the vicinity fell silent, captivated by the arrival of Makiyam. Even with her face concealed by a black fabric cover, it had been a while since Sowell and his senior sister had seen each other. She had surprisingly cut her hair, and judging by the lovesick gazes of the men at the table, it clearly suited her. She got that short hair effortless riz. Makiyum had been in turmoil for a while but had managed to compose herself after the haircut. She understood the need to move forward, knowing they would eventually have to return to Yanzhou. Before resuming her training, she needed to recover. To aid in that, Sewell had created a special dun pill to heal her internal wounds. She appreciated the efforts of her junior and was grateful for them. However, ingesting the dun pill had unexpected effects on Makiyum. Infusing foreign spiritual energy into her body would only worsen her condition. She started vomiting a substantial amount of impure blood. This was the first time she had encountered this rainbow pill that Sewell had concocted. It was an esoteric pill he had learned from his first master, crafted to the highest standards. Makiyum felt guilty for being confined to her room while her junior brother worked tirelessly to create this dun pill. Sewell wanted to repay her for saving him in the forest of fine beauty, and Makiyum was eager to compensate him with the spirit stones she had left. As a compromise, it decided to use the spirit stones to purchase new Dharma tools, recognizing that Daewoo Nation presented a new set of challenges requiring upgraded equipment. Makiyum had also heard about the rift's opening and the opportunity to obtain treasures within. Every 30 years, a powerful wind blows over Huijing, opening a portal to another dimension filled with rare sacred herbs, spirit stones, and treasures guarded by fiends. Alchemists from far and wide flocked to participate in this expedition, as there was no overseeing organization, making it a free-for-all. Considering this, Sewell decided to accompany his senior sister into the rift. With an increasing number of high-level alchemists in the streets, Makiyum had been concerned, but now she felt reassured with Sewell by her side. Before the rift opened, Sewell had some time to prepare, and his first task was to return to the Bao Xin sect to meet with the Cunning Lord. However, on this day, there was no need for disguises. He sat comfortably on the floor of the mysterious room. The child next to Lord Xiaobing was known as Baekran, here to observe and learn by the Lord's side. However, Sewell felt a strange attraction to the young lady, as if they had met before. She attempted a mental technique to penetrate Sewell's mind, but it resulted in excruciating feedback. These women had ill intentions, and their plans had backfired. Baekran couldn't believe how easily her evil spirit fragrance had been thwarted. Sewell knew the girl had attempted to bewitch him, so he pretended to be clueless, further adding to her insult. Her spiritual power was disheveled, and she needed time to recuperate. Lord Xiaobing acted as if she were not part of the sneak attack, trying to correct the wrongdoing by sacrificing Baekran to appease Sewell. Before the killing blow could land on the girl, he casually dismissed the matter. It was evident that this was a coordinated attempt, and he wanted to see how it would play out. Xiaobing tried to clean up the mess altogether but settled by ordering Baekran to leave, her blood smeared on the floor. The Lord had stopped hearing news about the faceless murderer and suspected Sewell's involvement. However, there was no merit in confessing, so he continued to feign ignorance. She had invited him to obtain information in the first place, as their organization dealt in information trade. But the Bao Xin sect was more than just an information hub. She had shared some basic information about the man out of curiosity about Sewell. However, Sewell had proven himself to be genuinely powerful. He could now trade information about the fate of the faceless murderer for an answer to a question of his choosing. After some thought, he decided it wasn't worth selling incriminating information, but he only needed to reveal whether the man was alive or dead. Sewell then disclosed that the man's body was buried in the northern rice field of Huijing without implicating himself. It was now his turn to ask a question. Her shiftiness still bothered him, but he believed there was nothing to lose. He wanted to find a way to reach the Yunnan nation. For the first time in her long career, she didn't have the answer or even knowledge of such a nation. It seemed even the owner of a renowned intelligence association couldn't assist with his master's revenge. Xiaobing, however, was too proud to let it go. She promised to find information about the country no matter what, though Sewell had little to no faith in her. Infuriated, the Lord attempted to change the subject to the upcoming rift. However, it appeared the Bao Xin sect wouldn't be sending their people into the rift. Since she couldn't fulfill her end of the bargain, she offered a tidbit of useful information to even the scales. After the meeting, Sewell left the room to breathe some fresh air and rest. Reflecting on what he had heard from the Lord, he noticed the mischievous girl from earlier, Baekran. She politely bowed her head, and he greeted her without hostility. This place truly was full of strange occurrences beyond his comprehension. For now, he had one more task to complete before the rift. It was time to bring out the big guns, the legendary Eternal Youth Dun Pill. He returned to the secret trade fair to sell one of his prized creations to fund his treasure jade research. The man put his heart into the sales pitch, capturing the intrigue and emotions of everyone in the hall. Some alchemists would gladly give up their wealth if this pill proved to be genuine. However, the sudden emergence of this legendary pill was almost too unbelievable. In that case, the management decided to verify the pill's authenticity while the auction for high-tier treasures continued as usual. A masked old man took the pill, and after a few moments, he returned, holding the eternal youth done pill in his hands. As expected, the verdict was that this pill was indeed the real deal.
Here comes the money. Here we go.
The intense bidding war for the miracle pill immediately erupted, with people gladly offering their entire net worth to obtain it. Soul had no clue that these alchemists would go absolutely wild for his eternal youth done pill. The top offer had already reached 70 highest grade spirit stones. That was until someone raised the price to 1 special grade spirit stone, each worth 100 highest grade stones. Then it climbed to 2, and then 2.7. One of the patrons silenced everyone with 5 special grade spirit stones. This was more than what Soul had made in his entire life. However, spending this much on the mysterious jade made him hesitant. He started to think that the treasure jade might just be a revenge prank left by the faceless murderer. He decided to save the special grade stones for now, but as he sank more of his wealth into this endeavor, his hope dwindled. It was a monstrous item that drained everything valuable from his pockets. A single special grade stone should be enough to change the life of an ordinary alchemist, but he was too invested to back out now. Any sane person would consider this a foolish experiment, but something this precious should yield results. The jade had been merely worn the other day, but it had become scorching hot today. He was now 5 special grade stones deep, with nothing else in the bank. You could only hope that this was the one. The treasure jade flew towards him. It seemed like something big was finally happening. The jade began to melt completely, revealing a single golden dun pill. He had no clue what it did. To find out, it was time to bring out his tiny helper again. From the monster pouch came Wanwan with his sharp senses for treasures. The best character of the series is finally back. The fragrance tracer feline stopped in his tracks when he got a whiff of the golden pill. Wanwan suddenly pounced on Soul, desperately trying to steal the precious pill from his grasp. He would turn him into cat stew if the little guy tried to eat it. Besides the pill itself, the cat wanted to eat the crumbs from the dissolution. After a while, there was still no change in Wanwan after eating the tiny fragments. He just seemed to be in a good mood. Just as Soul was wondering what was wrong, the fragrance tracer feline started to struggle with controlling his strength. He turned feral for a second and evolved into a different form right after. Soul finally had some idea of what this pill was. He had only heard of it once, and even his first master didn't have the recipe. He tried to lower his expectations before trying it out. Since Wanwan was fine, nothing bad should happen to him as he ate the pill. He lost consciousness for an unknown amount of time and woke up to Wanwan's licks. His senior sister was also by his side now. While she was practicing Qigong, she felt a bizarre energy coming from Soul's room and checked. She decided to guard him in a place full of alchemists. Right now, he didn't feel any noticeable change. The pill had turned into pure energy flowing into his Naidan. He thought he would become overwhelmingly powerful right away. But there was definitely some special change inside him. His magic barrier had transformed into a different form. Now he was certain that it was the mythical golden elixir. It didn't increase his spiritual power, but it matured his Naidan. His power was refined and consumption had been halved. With his high consumption combat style, this upgrade was a godsend. He was so pleased that he forgot to speak, but Makiyam knew that something incredibly good had just happened. For the first time in a while, he invited his senior sister for a quick spar. She vowed not to take it easy on him today. The long-awaited powerful wind finally blew over Huijing. This was the sign that the rift would be opening soon. Both Soul and his senior sister should be all set for the expedition, but the words of Xiao Bing weighed on him. The rift opened every 30 years, but the real treasure only appeared on the Rift Lake every 300 years, and this year happened to be that much-awaited opening. The Baoic Sin sect didn't send their own people. Instead, they gathered outside alchemists for events like this. Knowing how capable Soul was, having him represent the Baoic Sin sect would be a unique edge against the competitors who knew of the treasure's existence. Xiao Bing proposed to buy the treasures that he would obtain inside the rift for a fair price. She brought up some good points, but Soul had no intention of accepting. This woman was untrustworthy to the extreme, but before heading out, he wanted to buy some information regarding the layout inside the rift. That piece of info was very valuable. If he chose to make a deal with the Lord, he could get every piece of intel that the sect knew about the rift. 3 days had passed since that day, and he was firm in his belief that the information wasn't worth making a deal with the devil. Along with countless hopeful alchemists, Soul and Makiam finally arrived at the famous rift. Right now, he could only trust his senior sister and his own skills. Some unfortunate, weaker alchemists can't even approach due to the strong winds. Just as the duo prepared to accelerate their entry, an authoritative voice commanded everyone to clear the way. It's the imposing windmill carriage of the Mountain Willow Manor. Judging by the fear in the crowd, they seem to be a notorious family. The 4 red heavenly winged horses are a display of their strength. Soul can't help but wonder about the person inside the carriage. Regardless of who it is, the duo's main priority is to gain entry. As expected, they were separated from Makiam as they entered and planned to meet at the central lake as soon as possible. The exit will open in 1 to 3 months, and they must make the most of it. There's no need to hurry, so he and Wanwan can thoroughly scout the area. Soul sensed no immediate threats in the vicinity, allowing them to explore the land. Wanwan has been more enthusiastic and obedient since consuming the golden dun pill crumbs. The master and pet duo joyfully journey through the land, collecting rare treasures along the way. In just 2 days, they had already amassed a decent haul. The eager fragrance-tracing feline danced around a unique plant, a rare kernel ginseng. Soul noticed that the soil around it was still moist, and using a bit of spiritual energy revealed a hidden cavern. The entrance was quite narrow, with water seeping through the cracks in the walls. The cave expanded to reveal a concealed water reservoir. Since the cave and reservoir appeared undisturbed, there might be valuable finds here. Soul activated his golden barrier and plunged into the depths. At the bottom, green lights resembling stars came into view. To his surprise, these lights were approaching rapidly. They were ferocious green lightfish. They shouldn't pose a problem, so Soul decided to observe them first. These creatures were hostile, and their light beams couldn't penetrate his barrier. But dealing with this many underwater could be tricky. Fortunately, thanks to the golden elixir, he wasn't struggling with spirit energy consumption. The ugly fish were relentless, and Soul worked within the limited space of his barrier, utilizing his Dharma tools. Under the barrage of beams, the strain on the barrier increased. One beam managed to breach the barrier, but the creatures hesitated to follow up. All they saw was an irritated man who had been hit by a feeble attack. There was no point in prolonging this, so he instantly dispatched every fish in the vicinity. The loot this time was quite satisfying as well. However, Soul noticed that the corpses of the green lightfish were disappearing as if being sucked into another location. It was possible that there was a rift within this rift, given the unusual space. He conducted an experiment by tossing a dagger into the water and confirmed the presence of another dimension. He knew he had to investigate this further. Soul entered a portal in the depths of the water. In this peculiar space within a space, Wanwan showed little reaction. Only ordinary plants and terrain were visible, but Soul had a hunch there was more to discover. It didn't take long for him to find precious scarlet lichen, which he could use to create potent protection elixirs. As he gathered his loot, a sudden presence alerted Soul to prepare for combat. To his surprise, it turned out to be an old, decrepit alchemist, voraciously consuming the scarlet lichen. This was a truly bizarre turn of events, even for Soul. That's either a homeless guy or a secret master. This elderly man kept munching on the lichen, making strange sounds until he was disturbed by a drip of water. Soul didn't know what the right move was in this situation. The man might be in a situation similar to Gwengo Duan's back in the Lone Spirit Land. So for now, he wanted to approach the guy first. Soul and the old man locked eyes, both evidently wary of each other's presence. He asked why the elder had such a pained expression on his face. This man is an alchemist, and he doesn't care about Soul. This man is eating, and no one will stop him. Soul tried to approach and offered to treat the elder, only to be met with unintelligible noises. The old man might have suffered severe psychological shock, leading to him acting like a wounded beast. Soul tried to gently approach once again with some medicine in his hands. The elder is terrified, but he wanted help with at least the visible injuries. Soul treated the wounds on the man's arms and hands, and he'll have to move on to the rest of the body now. Injuries and minor wounds were no match against his medicine. The pain the elder was experiencing slowly subsided. The two spent a few minutes in the cave with absolute silence while Soul healed the elder. 4 days have passed since then. He even made some dewdrop elixir for the man's mental condition. But there are no signs of improvement. He just can't leave an old man with such a sad and desperate face after all. For the first time in a while, this mysterious man spoke some coherent words. He repeatedly yelled something about opening the chest that turned into stone. He's mortified about some evil spirit that has been chasing after him. The old man is absolutely terrified and panicking about a mysterious evil spirit haunting him. Going out of the rift is out of the question. He'd rather stay in this cave and eat moss the whole time. He finally had enough mental clarity to introduce himself as Chinongso from the Yi family of Yan'an. That shouldn't be far from Huijing, so finding the man's family shouldn't be a problem. As for why he kept insisting that he shouldn't leave this place, he believes that he's possessed by the evil spirit. Soul tried to reassure him that everything would be fine and he's just in shock after being locked up for so long. But it's not that easy to convince a crazy old man believing that he's possessed. Suddenly, the man reached into his clothing, and Soul jumped back in fright, thinking that an attack was coming. It was just a gold talisman, though. Kyongso thanks Soul for giving back his sanity, but all the evil spirit business is true. He tasks Soul to take the golden tag back to his family with the news of his condition, along with a final warning not to be tempted by the chest that turned into stone. He then rummaged through his clothing again and offered a small bag of spirit stones to Soul, which he rejected. Now that Kyongso had his sanity back, it's time to stop the evil spirit within him at once. He walked a few steps out and ended the curse. It's a terrible death, and Soul can only collect the ashes to deliver to the bereaved. The only surviving artifact in the man's possession was a mysterious bracelet. A week has passed since he set foot inside this rift. Soul decided to head for the center of the lake immediately. He can't keep his senior sister waiting in this turbulent place. Only God knows what awaits him in the center area of this mysterious space. Upon landing in the hot and humid central region, he immediately found himself drenched in sweat. It had taken him 5 days of travel to reach this place. Locating Makium in this vast coastal area would prove to be challenging. In retrospect, their decision to gather in this region seemed ill-conceived. They had underestimated its sheer size. However, Wanwan's remarkable sense of smell might remedy this situation. If one were to inquire whether the cat remembered the scent of the enticing senior sister, it would enthusiastically confirm that it did. They would commence their search along the coastline. The expanse of this lake resembled more of an ocean, and Soul was eager to try their luck in finding the valuable treasure with Makium. The cat finally detected something in a dense forest not far ahead. There was an energy within that could belong to his senior sister. Before he could even land his flying sword, Wanwan had already leaped down eagerly. Makium possessed the unusual ability to conceal her level, leaving him to trust solely in his pet's instincts. And just like that, he finally spotted Makium. But in front of her stood a familiar figure, the windmill carriage from the Mountain Willow Manor at the Rift entrance. He landed right beside his senior sister, sensing something suspicious. They exchanged greetings while the bearded man next to the carriage assessed their strength aloud. As they attempted to leave the area, the bearded man intervened. He wasn't harming Soul and Makium, but he was actively blocking their path, seemingly awaiting further orders from inside the carriage. For now, Soul decided to cooperate and asked the person inside to state their intentions. A delicate hand opened the door, revealing a strong-willed woman, Wee Peok of the Mountain Willow Manor. Judging by the fact that Soul couldn't discern her level, it was likely that this woman was at the breath of the sun level. The duo introduced themselves respectfully. Wee Peok didn't seem interested in engaging in idle conversation with him. She insisted that mere banter wouldn't grant them access to the lake. The determined woman delivered an extensive lecture on how they wouldn't survive the lake and its treasure competition at their current level. To resolve this, she suggested that the two of them accompany her on the journey instead. Wee Peok appeared to be rather self-centered. Rejecting her outright might lead to unfavorable consequences, so we'll try to provide a tactful reason for declining her invitation, putting his pride on the line. Wee Peok didn't take this excuse well. Soul's words painted her as overly greedy. Consequently, she offered them a fair share of the treasures, with she and No Wong selecting first. Joining her would certainly increase their chances of survival, but her trustworthiness remained shaky. The problem would arise when it came to dividing the treasures in the end. With Makium's abilities and his lesser devil poison, they stood a decent chance of survival regardless. Wee Peok noticed Soul weighing the pros and cons in his mind. So she made the decision simple for them. If they didn't join forces with her, they could bid farewell to their lives right then and there. Left with no other choice, they reluctantly entered a shaky alliance under the authoritative breath of the sun expert to explore the lake. The entire carriage was enveloped in a magical barrier, leading them underwater as Makium and Soul followed. Soul contemplated escaping, but that would only anger Wee Peok, whose formidable strength was evident in the massive barrier. They were descending without hesitation, knowing precisely what they were doing and where they were headed. Upon closer inspection, it was clear that No Wong was reading something from an artifact, a peculiar compass. Its operation remained a mystery, but if it could guide them to the treasure, It must be an extraordinary tool. Even the surrounding alchemists dared not interfere as soon as they saw the windmill carriage. This raised questions about why the powerful Wee Payuk had chosen to include the duo on her team. There was a possibility that these alchemists were representatives invited by Xiao Bing to represent the Bao Xin sect. Maintaining the pace and barrier in the water required considerable energy, and half a day had passed with no end in sight. Despite the darkness surrounding them, the carriage suddenly accelerated. Before them lay something unexpected in an underwater setting. A massive palace shielded by an even larger barrier. This was the location indicated by the sacred needle of the compass. A strong spiritual energy emanated from the mysterious palace, possibly the coveted treasure. Wee Payok exited her comfortable carriage once more. It was time for the true expedition. The palace was completely sealed off from the water, allowing them to enter and search every room for treasures. Everyone chose an area to investigate and plunder. Soul found some documents. Makium discovered containers, and even No Wong stumbled upon a peculiar-looking chest, albeit empty. Wee Payok, however, remained determined not to leave empty-handed. Soul had actually thought that he would be able to coast easily after getting stronger, but he's only encountered unhinged people so far. Getting away from the domineering woman is a must, but he has no method to do so. He doesn't even know her skills, so the risk is just too big. They went through countless containers and boxes in the palace with nothing to show for it. Wee Payok is getting increasingly frustrated by the second. They should be the ones who discover the 300-year treasure, and they're digging up nothing. She decided to give up on this building to use the sacred needle to find other infrastructures, and the needle didn't disappoint in pointing them to another pavilion. It's smaller than the palace, but there are still no eye-catching chests in here. If they do find a treasure, this woman would probably make every excuse to keep it for herself. Or she can just kill them outright. If they prove to be useless, the latter case is quite likely. They turned this pavilion upside down without any results at all. Inside this spirit energy-rich place, the sacred needle started pointing somewhere else. All of them have arrived at the very last room of the mysterious place. The needle is precisely pointing to this room, so a bit of floor remodeling might be necessary to uncover its secrets. No Wong unleashed his whip Dharma tool and aimed it at the center floor of the final room. It seems like, as much as she's ill-tempered, this woman is still an experienced alchemist. The hole in the floor lit up, and everyone activated their barriers. The time for them to go in has come, but just to play it safe, Wee Payok ordered the duo to go in first just to test the waters. So we'll reason that there's no reason for that as he volunteers to go in by himself. He jumped down into the blinding light of the hole. The other side of the pavilion was riddled with building ruins everywhere, but there is one building left standing with an imposing presence. It was a massive compound of grand structures that resembled gold. All is well on the other side of the light, so everyone decided to follow Soul. From anger into disbelief, and then a massive hit of optimistic euphoria has hit the overbearing woman, believing that she'll finally get the 3th-century treasure. She did not waste any second and rushed in. Soul kept a cool head while observing the Mountain Willow Manor people. At the forefront of the compound is likely the main hall. As their party was advancing, Wee Payok shifted into her vigilant mode after sensing something. A barrage of attacks followed suit, but she's capable of deflecting those. Wee Payok thought she blocked everything but got hit by one of the attacks through sheer power. She brought out the divine fire cudgel in response. The flames from that precious tool can be seen being blocked by some stranger's hand. It was an old man with his younger cronies. This man is known as Elder Pyong. It seems like it's widely known that her carriage's attendant, No Wong, is her lover, but Makium and Soul are strangers to everyone else. She intends to protect her pride against those words, enforcing that the duo are kids that she brought from her manor. Finding the legendary treasure would surely depend on these two breath of the sun alchemists. This old man from the Pyong family is quite persistent and cunning, following them all the way to the pavilion. He's just up there in the air, chilling and chatting instead of attacking. The tensions are running high, and when these two figures butt heads, any law of spirit energy alchemists will be rendered useless. Pyong family's old man tried to defuse the situation by proposing an equal division of any treasure found. It's so obvious that there's no sincerity in those words. Of course, Wee Payok sees that, and she's pissed with all the babbling. It turns out that the massive compound of grand structures is protected by powerful barriers. There is no way for either party to get into that place alone. She tested if the barrier really exists, and it seems like they really are stuck here. Old man Pyong continued to try and sweet-talk Madame Wee into a collaboration. He just wants a piece of the treasure pie. Just the presence of this man alone is already an omen that things wouldn't go smoothly. If they do work together to tear down this obstacle together, what happens after that shouldn't be more complicated. You can hear the dishonesty on the old man's boss while proposing an equal treasure distribution. They have no other choice but to join hands for now. Man, treasures make people go crazy. Using the combined force of everyone, the two parties successfully infiltrated the golden buildings. Inside were numerous statues, sensors, and chests, offering plenty to explore. The formidable barrier, which remained remarkably strong and only showed slight cracks under their combined effort, undoubtedly guarded something priceless. Madame Wei found herself at a loss, attempting to devise a plan to claim all the treasures for herself. This situation was complicated since both experts were on a relatively equal footing. It turned out that Elder Payan had been chosen as a replacement for Soul by the Lord of the Bao Xin sect. They continued their pretense of cooperation while searching for treasures to pilfer. A few moments later, they had gathered a considerable number of items, enough to bring happiness to all when divided equally. However, this world was one driven by greed, where the strong often claim everything. Amidst the piles of treasure, one particular box stood out to everyone. It was the chest that had turned into stone, the one Elder Chidongso had vehemently warned them about. Tensions ran high as they needed to inspect each individual treasure meticulously to maintain their deception. Soul was tasked as their side's representative to evaluate the treasures and determine their value. They began on opposite sides, and Elder Paiyang soon discovered a rare abominable stone. It was a prime material for crafting and enhancing Dharma tools. The Elder insisted on keeping it while eagerly anticipating more discoveries. One of his followers approached him with the cursed chest, curious about its impenetrable lock. The more secure a treasure, the higher the chance it held something extraordinary, and both experts were salivating with greed. Out of all the valuable chests in the place, this was the only one that remained locked. It was sealed not solely due to its value, but because it concealed something within. The two experts cooperated to open the chest slowly. It rattled, and an enormous surge of energy emerged. They had unwittingly released a malevolent force they should never have discovered. Its sinister aura was palpable, and upon closer inspection, the presence took on the form of a menacing spirit with a fearsome physical manifestation. This was an elementary spirit, an apparition from a high-level alchemist. They needed to handle it with the utmost care to avoid possession. Given the quantity and intensity of the spirit's energy, this would prove extremely challenging. The spirit bellowed with laughter that nearly shattered everyone's eardrums. It was a laughter that could shake anyone's soul and drive them into madness. This was precisely why Elder Chiangso had chosen to end his life rather than risk the spirit's resurgence. But Soul had an impenetrable mental shield in the form of the chant of black ice. In general, there were no effective Dharma tools, talismans, or techniques to subdue this spirit. Elder Payan had nothing, and when the experts were helpless, everyone was helpless. Soul decided to take the stone chest, hoping it might have some utility in containing the malevolent spirit. However, the presence had already begun its possession spree. One of the followers was completely overtaken by the spirit, but the elementary spirit was unsatisfied with only a vessel of a law of spirit energy alchemist. In gratitude for their greed, it sought to reward them with death. Even the breath of a sun expert would be ineffective in this situation. Disposing of the possessed body would only prompt the spirit to seek another host. Elder Paiyang and Madame Wei couldn't bring themselves to retreat when faced with a mountain of treasures. The spirit didn't want an old body but was also biased, unable to choose between the two experts to possess. Its solution was to drain everyone's spiritual energy and latent power. The mischievous spirit claimed its first victim, and Madame Wei finally considered abandoning the treasures. The two experts valued their lives more than wealth. Soul and Makia made the same decision and began to retreat. However, the golden building seemed determined to keep them inside after they had forced their way in. They had to find a way to break out or confront the elementary spirit. Madame Wei could only hope that her divine fire cudgel would be effective against this enemy. But it was to no avail. An apparition from a high-level alchemist was simply on a different level. They got no defense, no offense, no drip, no hose, and now they're going to get sucked dry. Elder Paiyang, foolishly, stood his ground and unsheathed his cherished blade. In an instant, his weapon disintegrated mercilessly, turning into dust. Fighting back by expending spiritual energy was futile at this point, but Soul knew there was a glimmer of hope. The madman Yi Qinongso had managed to escape this same predicament. Finally, Elder Paiyang succumbed to possession. The elementary spirit, like a child in a candy store, sought more alchemists ripe for absorption. Bored with the futile resistance, the apparition from a high-level alchemist yearned for something interesting. And that something might just be Soul. So please like and subscribe to witness some spirit humiliation in the next part.